Hello, and welcome to the Opportunities and Challenges of Social Media panel. Today, we will have an ever-important discussion on the good and the harm of social media, both in children and adults. Comments from computer scientists, social scientists, and psychologists will give us an interdisciplinary perspective of the issue. My name is Danny Lamb, coordinator for the Research Education Programs and Outreach Team in the Office of Research and Innovation at the University of Texas at Dallas. I will be your facilitator today. As we move through today's session, I invite you to post questions into the chat for our panelists to discuss. My question is for our panel chair, Dr. Bhavani Thuraisingham. First, I'd like to introduce her. She is the Founders Chair Professor of Computer Science, the Senior Strategist in Cybersecurity and Data Science since October 2021, and the Founding Executive Director of the Cybersecurity Research and Education Institute from 2004 to 2021 at the University of Texas at Dallas. She's elected Fellow of the ACM, IEEE, AAAS, and the NAI and the BCS. Her research interests are on integrating cybersecurity, artificial intelligence data science, including as they relate to the cloud, social media, and the Internet of Things. She has received several technical and leadership awards, including the IEEE CS 1997 Technical Achievement Award, the ACM SIGSAC 2010 Outstanding Contributions Award, the IEEE ComSoc Communications and Information Security 2019 Technical Recognition Award, the IEEE CS Services Computing 2017 Research Innovation Award, the ACM CODASPI 2017 Lasting Research Award, the IEEE ISI 2010 Research Leadership Award, and the ACM SAC MAT 10-Year Test of Time Awards for 2018 and 2019 for papers published in 2008 and 2009. Her 40-year career includes industry, federal research labs, U.S. government, and U.S. academia. Her work has resulted in 130-plus journal articles, 300-plus conference papers, 180-plus keynote and featured addresses, 7 U.S. patents, 15 books, and podcasts. She is also a co-director of the Women in Cybersecurity and Women in Data Science Centers at UTD since 2016. Dr. Thuraisingham, social media isn't just a small part of life anymore. Over 70% of Americans use social media and 90% of my generation. Why is it so important to bring this panel together and talk about the impacts of social media?
Thank you very much, Danny, for monitoring this panel and mediating the panel. So, I've been working in social media really for 20 years. When I joined the National Science Foundation, we used to get proposals in social media. And at that time, my interest was in analytics, analyzing social media, extracting those nuggets, applying data science. So when I joined UT Dallas in 2004, I collaborated with Professor Latifa Khan, and we did sort of lots of work on analyzing social media and extracting information like demographics and looking at sentiments and so on. So analyzing tweets, looking at Facebook as well as Twitter. And then around the latter part of 2000s, around 2008-9, I collaborated with Dr. Imran Khan, and we did some work on access control for social media privacy, as well as social media, as well as privacy for social media. So this was our main focus. Analytics as well as security, and then I started teaching a class around 2012 or 13 on analyzing and securing social media. And Dr. Contenzarlu and I, with our students, we wrote a book on that field, and that was, I think, around 2015. So a lot of my efforts were on the technical aspects. Then we started, hearing about all the horrible stuff that was happening in social media, such as cyberbullying, and more recently, fake news detection, and also lots of bad things happening, propaganda, hate speech. And so I started introducing social media governance into my curriculum for my class, and also talked about cyberbullying and fake news detection. And to find that my students, when I gave them programming projects, they were most interested in this fake news detection, because that's what we are sort of sort of urgent need for us, and there is so much danger and confusion, and also teenage girls committing suicide. So we really have to expand our focus. And that's why I thought of putting together this panel, which we had both the technical aspects, like Dr. Khan and Dr. Murat will talk about, as well as some of the other aspects. What's this media? So Dr. Fishwick will talk about it. And then Casey will discuss, as the Director of Student Wellness, what's happening there. And then aspects like cyberbullying and trolling. Dr. Sobolev will talk about it. So we have a panel that we have put together, which is a very sort of, it's a comprehensive panel and addresses every aspect that really every person should know. Privacy is important, analytics is important, and so is what's this new media and the student wellness, as well as trolling and fake news. So I hope that answers your question, Dani.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Thuraisingham. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off with our next question to Dr. Latifer Khan. First, I'd love to introduce him. Dr. Khan is currently a full professor in the computer science department at UT Dallas, where he has been teaching and conducting research since September of 2000. He received his PhD in computer science from the University of Southern California in August of 2000. Dr. Khan is an ACM Distinguished Scientist and received IEEE Big Data Security Senior Research Award in May 2019 and the SIRI Award in August of 2018. He's received prestigious awards, including the IEEE Technical Achievement Award for Intelligence and Security Informatics and IBM Faculty Award Research in 2016. Recently, he has become a Fellow of the British Computer Society, an institution of engineering and technology. Dr. Khan has published over 300 papers in premier journals and in prestigious conferences. Currently, he is serving as an associate editor of ACM Transaction on Internet Technology, ACM Transactions on Knowledge Discovery from Data, and IEEE Transactions on Artificial Intelligence. Dr. Khan, thank you so much for being here with us today. You have done a lot of work on analyzing social media. Can you please tell us about the opportunities that social media provides?
Thanks, Dani, for your nice introduction about me. So now I would like to talk about your questions, what benefits or opportunities social media can bring. So I'm going to answer that question with respect to two directions. First, I will present how social media brings opportunities in positive direction. Then I will talk about how social media brings opportunities in negative directions. And that's my opinion. Okay, let's talk about positive direction. So many of us use the Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, those social media. And when a government enforces some ruling or some policy, they want to know the feedback immediately. So one way they get the feedback by analyzing the content of the social media. Say, for example, during the COVID time, government enforces social distancing or mask mandate, and that type of, then government wants to know, federal government wants to know what is the outcome, how the citizens are reacting on that topic. So the idea here is we will analyze the tweets, and from there we will, once we do the content analysis, we can figure it out whether the citizens are liking the policy or not, and based on that, government can make their decision and revise their decision. So this type of things can be done in a very cheap way or a relatively easy way, but what we call it opinion mining or sentiment analysis. And then, as you know, that social media is one of the way to disseminate the information. This is the fastest way to disseminate the information among various sorts of peoples. There is a story, and this is a true story, when the earthquake happens in Nepal, and immediately it was posted in the Facebook, not in the Facebook, it was posted in the Twitter. And then also subsequently, when they want to address that issue, earthquake issue, by raising funds, they also heavily use the social media. So furthermore, social media can serve as a opportunity for small businesses. In a developing world, Facebook advertisement platform has been heavily used to promote their small business, to promote their products. They use that platform. So this is an easy way to disseminate information, and there's a easy way to reach a lot of people, and it's very cost effective. Furthermore, as Professor Bhavani Thuraisingham mentioned, that we did a lot of work in the content analysis, especially the text, the social media posting, like text, the Twitter messages, and so on. So there you can treat the data as a spatial and temporal in nature, and from there we can do a lot of trend analysis, demographic viewpoint analysis. So these are some of the benefits or the social media opportunities we can see in the positive direction. So now I want to talk about some of the opportunities that social media can bring, but this will be more towards or geared towards the negative direction. For example, as you know that Facebook is one of the ways to disseminate information very quickly, but there is a danger that fake news can be spread also through this social media. Then it can be used for the propaganda purpose. So for example, during the election time, it has been widely used to disseminate information where the information might be fake, or maybe propaganda purpose they spread this various news. And another important aspect is when people go for vacation, they post their messages or the pictures in the social media. And robbers always try to take the opportunity, and they know that the vacationer or the tourists are not at home. So what they do, the robbers go and do the burglaries at the vacationer's local home. So there is a lot of incident happen in the past. So please be aware of it. And last but not least, it can impact badly to the person who posted, who is a heavy users of the social media, because sometimes people, human has a tendency to do the popularity contest, and especially in the social media. So in that case, it can affect negatively. And last but not least, I want to tell you a little bit more about the computer science aspect. Since I work in a computer science department as a professor, so I can tell you that this social media brings a lot of opportunities for the information technology area. So it creates a lot of job opportunities. For example, in the social media, we deal with not only structured data, unstructured data. Structured data you can deal with the database and so on, but here we are dealing with the text, images, videos, and this data is very large, and it comes with various forms, and then data will come with a very high speed. So all this demands the very big data technology you need to learn. So if some of the listener who are from a computer science department or is a computer science student, I recommend you to consider the big data technology. If you learn those technology, this will be useful to get a very new job in this field. For example, 3 of my PhD students, one of them already working now in Facebook, and 2 of them will join in Facebook. So what I see that there are a lot of opportunities in terms of the computer science area for the job opportunity, especially if you look for social media aspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. It was really interesting. Made me really think about posting for my vacations for sure. Our next question is for Dr. Paul Fishwick. Dr. Fishwick is the Distinguished University Chair of Arts and Technology, ATEC, and Professor of Computer Science here at UTD. He has 6 years of industry experience as a systems analyst, working at Newport News Shipbuilding and at NASA Langley Research Center in Virginia. He was on the faculty at the University of Florida from 1986 to 2012 and was director of the Digital Arts and Sciences programs. His PhD was in Computer and Information Science from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Fishwick is active in modeling and simulation, as well as the bridge areas spanning art, science, and engineering. He pioneered the area of aesthetic computing, resulting in an MIT Press edited volume in 2006. Dr. Fishwick has over 240 technical publications and has served on all major archival journal editorial boards related to modeling and simulation. Dr. Fishwick, being in the media and technology field, how do these areas connect to the culture in which we live?
So Danny, thank you for that, and thanks for that kind introduction. So I really want to talk about, first of all, like a general definition of culture. Then I want to talk about media and touch on society as the third point. So I'm going to be covering, to some extent, even though I have two hats, computer science and ATech, my primary position is in ATech, which is arts, technology, and emerging communication. So I'll come from that angle mainly in this, as for my role in this panel. So every culture, you think about cultures, there's native cultures, which we're all a part of, and there are also cultures based on shared interest, things like that. And, you know, social media points to both kinds of cultural situations. I would say the first thing I want to talk about is media. What kind of media are possible? Well, you all probably know, I mean, there's so many different kinds of media that we have available. And I would start with email. Now, email classically is not social media, right? I mean, if you kind of look anywhere or do a Google search, and yet it is the prototype, it is the catalyst, I think, for all social media. And indeed, you can talk to other people. It may take a while to get a response, but it kind of is where it all began. Now we have things like text, images, videos, music. There are people who play in bands, and there's a Bandcamp is a social media platform for musicians. I've also played around a little bit with exploring the 3D modeling social network group. So depending on the kind of media you're talking about a different culture. And that's kind of my, I guess the first point. I also want to add in cryptocurrency. You probably have heard of, you know, crypto, right? And this is very interesting and relatively recent. But there are these tokens, they're called non-fungible tokens or NFTs, that provide proof of ownership and yet point to media. It's the media, it's the digital media that you're buying or you're selling in blockchain and cryptocurrency. And so, you know, crypto becomes part of this discussion as well. I do want to sort of end with society or the social. And the first thing I'd like to point out is that, you know, in talking to my daughter, I find that TikTok is where it's all happening, right? That's kind of where, that's where the young people are. That's where the millennials are. Then you go to Instagram and then you go to Facebook. So old people like me, you know, we still use Facebook, and Facebook is still very valuable, but the younger people aren't using it, right? And so that kind of gets to culture a little bit, and the social. I would say the social has at least 3 targets, social groups. One is family, second is friends, and third is interests. And I'll just give an example. I have an interest in the last 6 months on NFTs for art. So consider it machine learning, artificial intelligence art, which does involve a cryptocurrency connection with that. And for that, I follow Discord, Twitter, Slack, Reddit. And sometimes it's quite complicated. Reddit is almost like a river, and you have to kind of make sure that you're on the banks of the river looking in the right place at the right time. And so all these things come with challenges. And so that's all I have to say for now. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fishwick. I would totally agree of that age breakdown. That's something I learned about as a public relations major and degree as well. So that was really interesting. Thank you so much. Our next question and our next panelist is Dr. Anton Sobolev. Dr. Sobolev is an assistant professor of cyber policy and political economy at EPPS at UT Dallas. His research studies the role of technology in policy and politics using text analysis, machine learning, and causal inference. In his current projects, he explores the information tools employed by politicians and governments to maintain information control and their citizens' probable responses to the strategies these tools make possible. His work has been published in American Political Science Review, World Politics, European Journal of Political Economy, Post-Soviet Affairs, Europe-Asia Studies, and Problems of Post-Communism. Prior to his coming to UTD, he was a postdoctoral associate at Yale University. He received his PhD in government and master's in science and statistics from the University of California, LA in 2019. One of our biggest concerns with social media, Dr. Sobolev, is trolling and bullying. Based on your research, could you please speak to these concerns?
Thank you, Dania. So I must say that while trolling and cyberbullying use similar instruments and scholars use similar techniques to identify them, the nature of these two phenomena is very different. So when we talk about trolling in 2021, we mostly refer to paid political trolls. So this is because the vast majority of paid troll activity is located nowadays around political debates or on the promotion of misinformation for political purposes. And it is a mistake to think that troll farms are only created by some non-democratic governments to attack democratic states. Troll farms are cheap, and politicians all over the world organize them for their personal gains. Of course, they not only approach specific social media users, they do a lot of things. For example, they also fight each other in troll wars. For example, right now we witness a cyber war between Russian trolls and French trolls in Central African Republic. So when scholars try to study paid trolling, they face two challenges. The first one is the scale of the problem. So to estimate the scale of troll activity, we need some credible techniques to identify troll accounts. And basically, we have two strategies here. The first one is widely adopted by scholars and by digital platforms like Facebook or Twitter. And the idea here is that let's look at the suspicious activities of social media accounts. And this approach actually has brought some fruitful results. For example, it proved to be really useful for detecting botnets. And just to remind the participants that bots are not trolls. Trolls are real people, while bots are the automated scripts. So if dozens of thousands of users suddenly start behaving in the exact same way, this is suspicious, and we can catch these clusters of bot accounts by looking at the similarity of the behavioral patterns using machine learning, deep learning, network analysis, and other methods. So it really works great for bots, but not for the trolls. So, and the reason is that trolls actually know that state agencies, social media platforms, they are constantly looking for them, and they hide their troll identity. So they try to mimic the behavior of regular users. That's why our sophisticated AI algorithms fail to detect them. Now, sometimes the misclassification is both funny and tragic. So, for example, several years ago, Twitter was looking for trolls and mistakenly banned all social media users from Bulgaria. Now, the alternative strategy that scholars adopt is to use the data leaks from troll factories. Now, with these leaks, we can identify troll accounts with some high level, with confidence. But the problem here is that such data leaks are pretty rare events. So in the last 5 years, we learned about several such leaks from Russian, Chinese, and Korean troll factories. But the issue is that we don't know how representative these cases are toward overall population of troll farms. So we don't know if we actually can extrapolate the results from these case studies and make any general conclusions. Now, the second challenge is that many times trolls are not trying to attack specific users, but they actually attack the digital platforms themselves, like trends on Twitter, trending videos on YouTube, and so on. So in this case, we basically do not have a proper control group or a placebo group. So we cannot conduct any causal inference tests and say whether trolls actually change something in the online or the offline behavior of people. Now, when it comes to cyberbullying, we face different challenges. So people involved in cyberbullying, they usually are not getting paid. They do not try to mimic regular users. Thus, it is way easier to identify them or identify their offensive messages. But the challenge is, how do we measure the impact of cyberbullying on the behavior and also on the health of the targets? Right? So how do we know what happened to a victim of a cyberbullying? And at this point, all of these studies in the field are based on the survey evidence with some kind of the post-factum data. So for example, the recent study from a group of scholars from Yale showed that at least 20% of suicide attempts across LGBTQ community are related to bullying. And another research from Illinois State University showed that the exposure to cyberbullying increases the chance of suicide attempts by 9%. Now, these numbers look big, but I must say that, well, this is the survey evidence results, and as with the most, sensitive data here, we probably face a severe problem of underreporting. So to conclude, we just started realizing the importance of the issues of trolling and cyberbullying, and at this point, many parts of the puzzle remain extremely unclear. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sobolev. We do have some questions in the audience, but I think I am going to keep them for after our next two panelists answer their questions. Our next question is for Dr. Imran Contenzarlu. Dr. Contenzarlu is an Asheville Smith Professor of Computer Science and Director of the Data Security and Privacy Lab here at UT Dallas. He received a PhD in computer science from Purdue University in 2005, where he received the Purdue CERIAS Diamond Award for academic excellence. He is also a faculty associate at Harvard Data Privacy Lab and a visiting scholar at UC Berkeley RISE Labs. Dr. Contenzarlu's research focuses on the integration of cybersecurity, data science, and blockchains for creating technologies that can efficiently and securely process and share data, including in social media, security, and privacy. His research has been supported by grants including from the NSF, AFOSR, ARO, ONR, NSA, and NIH. He has published over 170 peer-reviewed papers in top-tier venues such as ACMKDD, SIGMOD, ICDM, ICDE, PVLDB, NDSS, USENIX Security, and several IEEE ACM transactions, as well as served as program co-chair for conferences such as IEEE ICDE, ACM SACMAT, IEEE Cloud, and ACM CODASPI. Dr. Contenzarlu, lately the term social media algorithm has been really prominent. With your expertise in data security and privacy, can you speak to security and privacy challenges, as well as the fairness and bias of social media algorithms?
Yes, thanks for the introduction. If you think about social media, first of all, in social media, there is lots of information people disclose about themselves. So there are obvious privacy issues in those information leaked or disclosed. And over the years, including our work, looked into what can you learn from that disclosed data. Latifer mentioned some of the machine learning and AI people can use, but those kind of information can be used to predict things like sexual orientation, and or political affiliation, and including other information such as your location, if you keep posting about your locations. So therefore, the things that you disclosed, combined with powerful AI and machine learning techniques, could reveal lots of information about an individual. And this sometimes can be used for good reasons. There was some work that tried to figure out whether someone is likely to be in depression, for example. And such a prediction and knowledge could be used for good, like intervention, etc. But also it could be used for some scams and or targeting these vulnerable people. So therefore, this information disclosed online can be misused. And of course, there are a couple of things that you can do to protect yourself. First of all, I recommend practical things. Of course, it's hard to protect maybe against these sophisticated machine learning techniques. But the simple things that you can do as a social media user is first of all, limit what you share. You don't need to share everything, I guess, in every platform. And then when you're sharing, I always recommend everyone to think about when my significant other sees this piece of information I'm sharing, whether it's a picture or TikTok video or whatever, where you're in the bar or something, what the significant other will think about it, what my mom will think about it, and what my boss will think about it. So in a sense, think about first, before even sharing, like what would be the implications in the short term. Also, I always suggest yearly cleaning of your social media. So I would recommend everyone to go back and look at what you shared in the last year. It's a good time maybe to do in Thanksgiving, and delete as much as possible. I mean, some of the things you shared is not required anymore, but some things you want to keep. For example, on LinkedIn, a couple of years ago, I shared when we published a book. Of course, I would like to keep that post. But if I had a picture with my friend, in a conference, maybe it's not as relevant anymore. So therefore, you could have those kind of precautions and delete some of the stuff so that it won't create issues down the road, because in the future, maybe potential employer or potential significant other can look at it and maybe misunderstood some of those. So this is the privacy aspect. In other words, limit what you share and also control who can see it. In some medias like Facebook, you can also control who can see your post, like friends, etc., or general public. So you can use this to limit what you could share. The second thing I want to talk about a little bit on the security aspects from the scams and other type of issues. So, for example, Paul mentioned about like Bitcoins, Nifties, and so on. For example, there was a scam this summer that tried to sell a pyramid scheme on blockchain via social media channels. I've seen some YouTube videos promising that I will be very rich by using this new blockchain tool if I just send a couple of $1,000 worth of Ethereum there. So you need to also be careful what you hear. Already there is talk about a little bit bullying and discussion about fake news. I always recommend not doing any action just based on something you see on Facebook. Always double, triple check the information via some other means, because there is also fake news, there is also scam and other security threats going on social media. So I'll stop here, and then if there are more further questions, I can go into more details.
Thank you so much, Dr. Contenzarlu. We really appreciate it. Our next and final panelist that I get to introduce today is Ms. Casey Siebenecker. Casey received a bachelor's degree in health promotion from Oklahoma State University in 2009. Soon after, she was hired as a health educator at Oklahoma State University and was responsible for the peer health education program, as well as the implementation of health education materials to students. Casey received a master's degree in health studies from Texas Women's University in 2014, while serving as the wellness coordinator at the University of Texas at Dallas from 2010 to August 2015. Casey served as the assistant director within the Student Wellness Center from August 2015 to August 2016, and then was promoted to director in September of 2016. Casey is a master certified health education specialist and oversees student health education programs and services related to alcohol and drug education, sexual health, nutrition, stress management, healthy relationships, bystander intervention, and suicide prevention. Casey, as the Director of Student Wellness, you interact with our students on a daily basis. As you listen to the research and comments from our other panelists, can you speak to your experience with our students in social media? For example, are there gender-specific concerns?
Yes, thank you, Danny, for the introduction. So what we have found on the student side of things in relation to social media's impact on health and wellness or general well-being is that social media can have a negative impact across all genders. So no gender is safe in terms of negative impact from social media. If you break down different health topics, there definitely are some differences, among genders. So we might see some data has shown that cisgender females may be more negatively impacted in terms of healthy body image or nutrition related social media posts than other genders. So there are some specific breakdowns per topic in terms of gender influences or impacts, but relatively speaking, all individuals are subject to some negative social media impacts in terms of their health and well-being. But we also see some positive impact in terms of social media and health and well-being. So 2020 and 2021, I think all of our panelists can agree, gave us a lot of opportunity to think of some research questions and how social media has impacted society and really the globe during a pandemic. And what we found among students during that time is that students reported feeling like mental health or like depression related to social media and just their access to what was happening globally, not just with the pandemic, but also the political situation here in our country, the social constructs, in terms of race and other issues that we were going through during 2020 and 2021. And so, the access that social media provides us can definitely have a negative impact on our health and wellness. On the flip side, during 2020 and 2021, social media was the main way that we had social interaction. And in terms of health and wellness, social interaction is key in terms of having, a well-rounded, healthy lifestyle. So, on one hand, we had some negative impact, and then on the other, there were some positive during 2020 to 2021 in terms of social media. And so when we visit with students about various health topics, whether it be, high-risk drinking, relationships, nutrition, behaviors, information about public health concerns like COVID, what we encourage students to do is to consider social media as if they would any other health topic. There has to be balance, and sometimes we need moderation. And so if we find that a certain platform is causing us more harm than good, maybe towards our mental health, how can we self-regulate and maybe step back a little bit, maybe visit that app less often or not at all for a period of time, so that we can refocus and focus on our health and wellness that may be negatively impacted by social media. On the other hand, the positive side of things, if you can connect with people who maybe normalize, a behavior trait that you have or a personality trait, and you can find some camaraderie online, I think that can be a positive in terms of various areas of health and wellness. So definitely thinking of social media as something we need to balance and moderate, and knowing that it can impact various areas of our lives, including areas of health and wellness, is important in terms of our own behaviors, and then anybody that we're trying to, help navigate life, to talk about those things, that it's okay to step away from an app if it no longer brings you joy or any sort of positive reinforcement. And also, how can we use social media to have a positive impact on society when in times like this it's needed.
Thank you so much, Casey. As a student, as an undergrad in 2020 during the pandemic, I really do relate to that. Just so much information coming at me at once, and it is a lot to kind of be able to process. So I do have another question. It is for Dr. Thuraisingham. I know you've been really interested in the concept of branding yourself on social media. I'm hoping that you can speak to this as well as kind of tie in age-appropriate use of social media.
Okay, that's a tough question. So, and a very interesting question. So this is the same question I asked a lady yesterday who gave the presentation about LinkedIn. So branding yourself is really important, because what is that extra value that we can bring, right? Especially for us professionals, professors, and directors, and so on. So we need to sort of brand ourselves, but again, we cannot flood the social media with all kinds of information just to brand. Now, I use social media only for professional purposes. So even that, what I do is when I try to post something, I usually post probably around once or twice a month, not more frequent than that. And so what happened was I posted something on my Facebook page, and then some other interesting information about me, came up, some of my activities. So I posted that on some of the groups I belong to, the group page. So that's really important. You don't want to sort of be overly exposed, right? So branding is important, but you've got to also think about the negative consequences of branding, right? And I'm still trying to master, I'm still a novice with respect to social media. As I said, LinkedIn is like a jungle for me, so I want to sort of master that. Facebook, I really know some of the things to do and what do you tweet. So everything that you do has to be meaningful. So that's really important. And how do you become an influencer? So these are things I'm learning, and also very important to have a nice website. You know, you have your university website, and then you also want to have a personal website, which is professional, a personal professional website. And then the other thing is with age appropriate, right? That's sort of the challenge, because when I post, I mean, I have friends who are in their 20s and right up to who are in their 80s. I'm in my 60s, so you can see it's from 20s to 80s or maybe even 90s. So we all sort of, I mean, I don't think about sort of age, what we want to post for the different groups. So I really post something that is very, very relevant and what I want to get out there. But again, there's a question from the audience, and maybe someone can answer. What should, children, what should they be posting, right? Should parents be monitoring? So I don't want to answer that question because I noticed that there was a question from the audience. So these are some of the challenges, and I think we can really use social media to our benefit. But unfortunately, not everyone does that. So that's the challenge that we are faced with.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thuraisingham, and I will actually direct that audience question to any of our panelists who want to answer. And just also a reminder for our audience, please submit your questions through the Q&A to continue this interactive panel. So this question is, what can parents of children who use social media do to monitor their child's activity on social media? And I'll leave this up to anyone who wants to answer.
So I don't think, I mean, my son was almost when social media was there, he was almost like 18, 19, so he was an adult. And I have grandchildren who are very babies now, so I don't think I have had that problem. So maybe some of the others could answer the question.
I can jump on it. I have an 11-year-old daughter, so I'm worried about that myself very much, and so on. So what I try to do is that without, of course, she's all independent phase. She doesn't want me to look at all these things, but I try to really look into the apps, and sometimes I monitor. I have to confess, monitor what who she's interacting and what she's sharing. So therefore, I want to make sure that there is nothing bad. One thing I always ask her is that don't interact with anyone that you don't know offline. That's something I always mentioned. I know I also mentioned her not to share anything sensitive, so she's very well aware of that needs, not to share any inappropriate images. So actually she used camera protector to make sure the camera is not on. So to summarize, follow up what they are doing, emphasize the fact that online has some not nice people, and only interact with people who are online that they know in offline world, like their school friends and so on, nothing else, but still from time to time just monitor.
Thank you so much. And I really think this kind of leads to a question that I had myself. As a recent undergrad, as a PR sociology graduate, social media has just been in my life since really I was 12 years old, and it was about 2008, 2009, and it just kind of kept growing, and I grew up with it almost. And so my question for any of our panelists is, what advice do you have for young adults trying to navigate life in the age of social media? It's a lot different than it was 20 years ago. So I'd love kind of advice for my own personal aspects, but also I think there's a lot of students and recent grads that can benefit from any advice that you all have.
Jump on that one from a health and wellness perspective. I would say, I think social media is going to continue to be part of our lives. And so I think we need to figure out a way that we can, add it in to a normal lifestyle, but still have balance in in the sense that it's not having a negative impact. And so what I encourage students to do is to, the time that they spend online is fine. I don't think that that's anything to be ashamed of. I think previous generations might say, like, social media is ruining society and whatnot. I just think we're socializing differently. But I also think that we have to remember the benefits of in-person interaction and how valuable that can be for our health and wellness, and how much we as humans need that. So I think finding a balance between the two is important. And then also understanding the risks involved with social media, knowing that, if I go down a path where it starts to negatively impact an area of my life, whether I'm being bullied or maybe my mental health is suffering, that to empower everyone to take control of that and to address it, and that it's okay to change how you're doing things now, and that how you use social media can work for you, and it may look different for other people and how much they use it or what apps they use, but we can find some way to make it all work for us and benefit us rather than hurt.
Thank you so much, Casey. That kind of leads to another one of our audience questions. I'll actually direct this. Oh.
Yeah, Danny, I would step in on that question. So from I think from the building the academic career, if you think about building the career in academia, so far I believe the only useful social media so far is Twitter. So basically the Facebook, I know nothing about LinkedIn, don't think that it's really important in academia, but like the Facebook, Instagram, the other social media, they're mostly for, for the pleasure. In contrast, Twitter has these networks of the clusters of the professional Twitter accounts. If you're doing like career in econ, there is a econ Twitter. If you're working in poli-sci, there is poli-sci Twitter. If you're working in cybersecurity, there is a cybersecurity clusters of Twitter, and follow people from these clusters, post the the important results, the published papers that you have, or the public talks that you gave. So the Twitter actually is important if you're thinking about the development of your like academic career or like cybersecurity career and so on. Yeah.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Did anyone want to talk on that question?
So I just want to add one more thing. I think LinkedIn is also play a significant role when you look for a job, and you can create a profile in LinkedIn and post your CV there. So then, you can contact with a lot of recruiters through the LinkedIn. So that way you can eventually get an interview or job. Eventually you will get a job offer also. So it is important you should have a big presence in LinkedIn. That's my recommendation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. Did anyone else want to touch on that question before we move on? All right, our next audience question here is kind of related, and I'm going to direct this to Dr. Fishwick, and then hopefully if Dr. Sobolev wants to answer this question as well. What do you suggest individuals do to protect themselves from social media bullies or trollers?
Well, I would say the first thing to do is not to react immediately. Sometimes we call it a knee-jerk reaction. You want to sit and think about, what happened, maybe get opinions, cross-check. I think Murat made this point earlier. It's very important that you want to cross-verify, right, and cross-check. So I think the first thing is just don't react immediately. The problem is it's human nature to react immediately to things. So we have to fight our nature a little bit, but I think it'll be time well spent if you go ask your friends, your partner, and so forth about what's going on, get some different opinions. And that's probably, in my opinion, that's the first thing you could do.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Dr. Yeah, please, Dr. Sobolev.
So I would I study these questions with the public policy perspective. So my hope is the changes in the behavior, the policy and the regulations at the level of the state agencies or at just the corporate regulations of the digital platforms. So far, unfortunately, I don't know any good ways for individual to protect herself on social media. So one of the results that I've been studying is that actually people are really bad at identifying trolls online. So you can talk you can talk to them, and you don't have the capacity to figure out whether this person is a troll or not, because actually to do that you need to make a pretty complicated statistical test, look over the history of the posts of the specific person, and only after that you can figure out that this person behaves in a very suspicious way. Like, it's really hard to distinguish between those who are getting paid for promoting some misinformation or from those who are actually do it who are honestly believe in the things they say and so on. So actually my hope is at the regulation level here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sobolev. Did anyone else want to touch on that question? No, all right. I'll move on to another audience question here. How much and what kind of information is appropriate to share on social media as an adult professional?
I can jump in on this one. I think as a starting point, adult professional, anything that directly advances your professional career, I find it appropriate. Like in my case, I would share whether I have a new book or some new project. I think these are nice things to share, and it kind of promotes your work. With respect to more personal stuff, I think it may be good to share some with your friends directly, but not the entire world. So for platforms like Instagram, etc., if you have if you share multiple things with multiple audiences, I think you may only share certain personal links with friends and or significant others. And again, please note that just sharing with them doesn't mean that it cannot be copy pasted and done. Still, even the personal things should be okay to share public, or if it's leaked to public, it shouldn't be any problem. But for personal, for example, for Instagram, I closely control the personal images that I share with, but I only share like pictures with my family and so on, nothing crazy or anything like that. So therefore, in those levels, I would suggest either having multiple profiles, like one private, one public, or use this access control features carefully, and still be very careful in what you share.
So I'd like to add to that. It's a very interesting question and good answer that Dr. Contenzarlu gave. So the question that I have, not sort of related, not question, a comment, is that should you share photos and information about, say, your children, your grandchildren, especially if there are minors, without their permission? Because my husband actually is extremely private. He does not want anything to be shared. But I have shared on a professional setting that, like when I got my ACM fellow 4 years ago, so we had this celebration. So I shared a photograph that was taken with him. And so he was not happy about it, but he didn't sort of complain, because he got to know, because one of my students called him and said, "Oh, it's a lovely photograph Dr. Bhavani has posted." Now the question about children, and like I would love to post about my son and my grandchildren, but then I've never posted because unless they give me permission. So that's always been a sort of a problem with me. So I almost all the time post only professional stuff, and professional stuff which includes personal family members like my husband, then I will post it, a couple of photos, but in general I don't. But again, everyone has their choice, right? Many people post lots of stuff about families.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thuraisingham. I know a lot of my peers, especially because we grew up on social media, so all we've known is to post, our families and those social aspects and our friends. So a lot of my peers are almost changing their names on their previous social medias, their social medias, and then creating new, as Contenzarlu was kind of hinting at, professional social accounts to be shared. And so I think it's interesting. I think it's it's up for debate if companies can find your private one or your public when you're starting to look for a job, and how that can kind of affect you. I think we could do a whole panel on how your past social media posts can affect you. But if anyone wants to speak on that quickly, that would be great.
I just want to mention that if it's even if you have a different name, etc., because of the face recognition systems, it will be not hard for someone like, for example, Facebook to link them easily. So therefore, they can be found, but I suggest them to turn into private mode and only with friends. That will make it much harder to access, at least for your future employers. So that's what I would recommend.
Thank you, Contenzarlu. Did anyone else want to speak to that question real quick? Or more of my comment? No, all right, no worries. We do have another audience question, and I think this one is directed to Ms. Casey. Does the Student Wellness Center have any education programs, resources to assist students and staff who are struggling with cyberbullying or trolls? I know for just kind of my generation and my peers, it is something that can really affect our mental health.
Yes, so we do provide large campus events or classroom presentations that are focused on social media in general, in terms of, how to address any sort of cyberbullying, but also like the mental health effects. And then we also will meet with students one-on-one to help with specific scenarios that they're facing. And our goal in that is to advocate for them and help them advocate for themselves. And then also talk about any sort of like reporting resources that may exist depending upon the situation, just letting them know what they do have access to in terms of reporting as a student, and then also, mental health support services if that's necessary. So we try to address it from all angles of the legality side of what may be happening, but also how to protect ourselves and address, the impact that may have on us. And so, I think a lot of people, if you're talking about, adolescents, a 12-year-old and 11-year-old, I think that parents' first reaction is to, oh, well, you're getting bullied, you need to delete all your apps. And for someone at that age, that's kind of like cutting off their lifeline, so to speak. And so we do talk about to students even now about, you don't necessarily have to get rid of the apps, but how can we prevent this from affecting you more? What can you do on your end to protect yourself? Obviously, any bullying is not your fault and it shouldn't be happening, but how can we protect ourselves and still have access to social media, the positive benefits that is?
That's great. Danny, can I maybe we can answer this question, or maybe go into the over time section, time and answer this. But the thing is, there was this question that about fairness and bias, and also these algorithms. That's the controversy now, that Facebook is developing these algorithms. And so what do we do with that? What is the problem and how can we handle? And maybe Dr. Contenzarlu, Dr. Khan, and even any of the others. So I will leave it to you to decide whether you want to answer it now or maybe at 1 o'clock when we move to the other session.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Thuraisingham. I think that's a great wrap up. I think we will kind of encourage everyone to join us for the Backstage session. That starts right at 1, and you can find the link in the Q&A chat. I'm going to wrap up. I want to thank all of our panelists, Dr. Thuraisingham, Dr. Khan, Dr. Fishwick, Dr. Sobolev, Dr. Contenzarlu, and Casey for sharing your time, talent, and resources with us today. We would appreciate any and all feedback you might have about this social media panel. Please click through the survey link found in the Q&A chat to share or scan that QR code. Please stay tuned for upcoming Office of Research and Innovation events this spring. Again, feel free to use that QR code to subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on social media, or fill out that survey. Thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving break, and we hope to see you at our Backstage Pass.
Right. My question that I had posed at the end, and hopefully, some of the members of the panel could answer, is the latest controversy with the Facebook, the algorithms, right? The algorithms are biased and they are not fair. They are trying to propagate fake news, and they are trying to propagate evil. So attract people to come back for negative, when they sort of post negative stuff. So what do we do? What are these algorithms and how do we handle them? So if someone maybe from CS can talk about the algorithms, and then maybe some others like Paul and Anton and Casey can talk about some of what we can do. So since Dr. Khan has to leave for teaching, maybe he can start, and then Dr. Murat, and then we'll see how it goes.
Thank you, Dr. Thuraisingham, for asking this interesting question. So underneath all of this Facebook or social media, they use a lot of machine learning or AI algorithms. And this algorithm need to be trained with a certain data set. Usually these data set are biased or skewed. So for example, nowadays, in what Dr. Murad mentioned, face recognition system, it works very well for a certain types of faces, but when it comes to the certain colors, it may not work very well. Furthermore, when the job recommendation system uses machine learning algorithm or AI algorithm, it always favors male over females in terms of the recommendations. So there is always bias. So this bias starts with the training data issue and then skewed data issue and so on. So nowadays, a lot of machine learning researchers are trying to address that issue by considering these biases. So what they call it, fairness aware machine learning or AI. So you will see some improvement in future where they will tackle that issue. And I'm hoping that Facebook, what the question you asked, Facebook has its own limitations, so they will address, they're working on it definitely, and they're going to address that issue in future. Thank you.
And if Dr. Murat could add his, because he wants fairness as well, and then the others can sort of chime in afterwards, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think fairness is a big issue in all these, and I had a chance to actually see some of the research thanks to Latanya on this many years ago. Latanya Sweeney was a professor at Harvard. I was visiting her lab. For example, at that time, I think it was almost 8 years ago, she found out that different people, whether they are African American sounding names or white sounding name, if you search those names on Google, you would be getting different type of ads. And if it's African American sounding name, you would be getting like, or do you want to see arrest record? If it's like a white sounding name, you would be getting like, or do you want to see his or her background? So this was very early thing showing that AI systems and all social media based information could learn to discriminate. And of course, since then, there are lots of research done on to understand the impact of fairness and so on. But as everything automated, as Latifah was mentioning before, I think testing and auditing these systems would be even more important. So therefore, I think we would need both. I would follow up on Anton's point on regulation, that like we need maybe more regulation on how the social media data is used by companies. And the second thing is that whenever the data is used / combined with AI, ML, we need to be able to have maybe independent audits of this information. GDPR, for example, which is a European privacy law, points out some kind of remediation if AI is used for certain decision making, but I think it's still very primitive and it's lacking in US. So as AI and ML become more critical component with social media, I think we would need infrastructure to audit fair use of all this information.
So I have a question related to that. So, with this AI and all these algorithms and stuff, right? They start from humans, and humans are naturally biased in the society we are in, right? So do you think is that where the start of that bias comes from? Is the humans and the companies creating these AI systems?
There are multiple parts. One thing is the data, as you pointed out. For example, Well, that's what Amazon has seen in their recruitment AI model, because their past data was heavily biased against certain subgroups because they didn't hire them to begin with, or because of structural things, let's say, or the work schedule, women may be less likely to succeed because they don't have enough flexibility when they have kids, this and that. So if you look at such a data, your ML AI model will learn to say that, oh, woman is not successful in this job. So this bias can be learned by the AI models, first of all. And the second thing is that that's the data bias, and that's one of the big reasons. And why the data bias happens is because it's encoding past bias, or it may be errors in the data collection and so on. And of course, the second thing is that the model itself could be not trained properly or tested properly. This kind of sometimes leads to the data issue as well. But one common thing is that Microsoft was using image tagging system, and they didn't test it on properly on African Americans. So in some cases, either the system didn't recognize such faces in the data in the social media post, for example, or in some cases they tagged it as like I think monkey or something. So it was, of course, awful. They stopped immediately. So there is the other aspect of how you build the model is also important.
So Danny, to essentially what Murat is saying is that, you train, right, the machine learning algorithms, you train with the past data, right? So who are the successful people? How old are they? Maybe continuously, because most people are men, it'll say it's a male, 38 years old, or male, 28 years old. So constantly training. And so new opportunities, when they arrive, it'll be given to male, 35 years old, things like that. So maybe, Danny, maybe some of the others, Anton and Paul and Stacy may have some comments on that as well.
Yeah, I would step in.
Yeah.
So I agree with all the previous speakers and Murad specifically about the like, of course, when it comes to the sophisticated Facebook algorithms, it starts with the fact that all our data sources, because they trace like the history of human literature, of human messages, and so on. It has a lot of built-in biases, and it's not reasonable to expect from machine learning algorithms to avoid them if they exist in the training data sets, right? So here the potential solution where the companies are looking for is like, can we actually get rid of these biases in the training in the training data? And of course, with some of them, it's pretty easy to do, right? So we can create gender neutral texts and train the algorithms on these gender neutral texts. But with other things like racial biases, it's way more challenging than just with the question of gender. And the second point, I believe, so apart from this big question of these sophisticated algorithms for identification things automatically on social media and other digital platforms, we have this competition where like people who do not really have good intentions can use the reverse engineering techniques to figure out what are actually the features of the Facebook algorithms or YouTube trends algorithms to trick them, right? And especially with the combination of the increased I would call it like the strong AI things like GPT-3, we can the way you can trick these algorithms for different personal bad purposes, like it's just a multiple ways of doing them. If you combine this, if you use the machine learning on your own to trick the algorithms from the Facebook and Twitter, and of course with this huge improvement in the strong AI like GPT-3, we potentially have a huge problem that we don't know how to solve at this point.
I just want to add one important thing. When you are talking about, let's say, Facebook, the problem with the Facebook, they don't usually share the data with the researcher. And it's very difficult nowadays to get the data. If you get the data, you can do a lot of things. And with that regard, I think the Twitter is very open-ended. From the Twitter, we can get the tweets easily. But Facebook is extremely difficult nowadays. So that might be one of the reasons where researcher may not be able to make any significant progress. So this is one of the limitations. I think we should need to convey this message to Facebook somehow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good point.
I'm leaving anyway.
Well, have a nice class, Latifer.
Paul, do you have anything to add to this, Paul? Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Bhavani. I guess just an example application of bias, which you could see bias occurring on both ends. OpenAI is a kind of a major AI research group. They rolled out one of the larger models. It's not the largest anymore, but it's a very large language model, GPT-3. Now, GPT-3, of course, suffers from the same problems that we've been talking about, which is data. Everything's trained on data. And if those data are biased, then it's going to leak into GPT-3's performance. So there's training, and then in AI, we call it inference. That's the other side. That's where you're using the model, the trained model, in order to provide inferences and new knowledge. And GPT-3 is actually a good model for studying bias. So I'm just saying the bias thing goes a lot of different ways. One is there's issues with training the data set that GPT-3 uses, but there's also, it can also be used itself to identify bias. So yeah, I kind of agree with Murat on the, ultimately I think there's going to be more regulation. I know that's an ugly word for a lot of, a lot of people. It depends on, politically where you stand. But I see that as being a potential outcome. We need to get in and look inside. Somebody needs to get in and look inside the black box. And
I really like what you're saying. If I may, Danny, just a comment. I'm not a political person, but I sort of, especially when it comes to social media, I strongly believe in regulations. So not for any political positions or anything like that. It's just that we have to make it safe. Because if we don't do it now, I just dread to think what's going to happen. So Danny, if you have something else to.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of see if any of our attendees had any questions or comments, kind of what they learned from our panel. If you'd be willing to speak up. You don't have to, you can type it in the chat, but we'd love your reactions and questions as well. Give a second for that. Anyone wants to speak up? If not, no worries. I can. I kind of want to pick Dr. Thuraisingham's and everyone else's brains on. So we need regulation for social media, right? And I completely agree with that. I mean, right now, is it the government's problem to fix? Is it the Facebook's problem to fix? Is it the AI's problem to fix? I mean, whose problem to fix is this?
I would say, right, you don't want a czar, right? We don't want that. I think together, Facebook and the social media companies, the government has to be involved, the policymakers, and also the algorithms, the researchers, right? Just when, 20 years ago, I was on a panel, actually 18 years ago, KDD, and the panel was, what is the privacy and data science? Are they friends or foes? They are neither friends nor foes. We need a collection of people to work together. And that's what we need to do here. And maybe Anton may have something to add to that.
I think Dr. Sobolev had to go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yes, you mentioned that, right. So, and my question also, Danny, is what do we, UT Dallas, how do we proceed in the future with such an important, I mean, it's great that RCR, had this panel, and what do we do sort of in the future to move forward, and how can we sort of take a leadership position? Because you can see it's not just technology. We needed every single person in this panel, right? Not just Dr. Murat and Dr. Khan, who are sort of in the computer science. Also from ATEC, we had Dr. Fishwick and Dr. Sobolev from EPPS, and Sebana, Miss Casey from Student Wellness. And so all of us, made this panel, I would say, interesting and very relevant, right? So how do we move forward? That's a question. And maybe even anyone in the audience, or you, Danny, or what do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, from my perspective, just growing up with it, and like Casey said in the panel, it's not going to go away. It is never going to go away. There's going to be more and more people. It is so ingrained in our, even a new way of socializing. I love how you said that, Casey. So for me, I think the biggest thing for me right now is being able to regulate kind of what I'm seeing. And that kind of, one of our audience members asked a question, and that's kind of what I want to get at. She asked, is there any way for average users to avoid being affected by social media algorithms? For example, to change the way their content for their newsfeed is determined. And I think for me, I have my political opinions, but I get caught in, you know what I mean? I get so mad about something that doesn't end up being true. And I just get mad about it because I saw it on social media. And so how do you navigate that? How do you move forward with that? And I think, of course, regulation is a big thing. There's so many questions here, but I would like to address, is there a way to avoid that, or kind of change our content around that?
So that's so interesting, because always is regulations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was, I didn't really have much knowledge about policies. So when I don't have some knowledge, I go and I got a certificate in public policy from the London School of Economics. It's an online. So that's the danger, because now I know a little bit about policy, not too much. So it becomes I'm sort of more dangerous, in the sense that I say regulate, but that may not be the solution. So it'll be interesting to have further discussions on this. I don't know what others think about it.
Let me just comment on that. I need to leave as well. My thinking is that at least for these kind of algorithms, they quickly learn from what you like. That's their goal. So what I try to do is that I try to change what I like if I don't like what I see. So for example, if you are seeing too many tweets about certain topic, if you deliberately search for something else, start looking for it, then you will suddenly start seeing that what you are seeing is changing. So therefore, from time to time, by changing what you are looking into, you may change what you are seeing on your profile. Of course, on Facebook, it's slightly different. Your friends also include stuff. You can turn off some of the things that you see and give a hint to the algorithm. So therefore, what you see in the past will heavily determine what you will see in the future. And in order to do that, if you want change, then you need to change what you are looking into, and the platforms will learn that quickly.
So I just have a question to Casey. Maybe she can comment, because she's she deals with students day to day, right? What do you think, with social media and student depression and suicide? What do you think, Casey, we should be doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we don't know all the answers yet. But I think, the message that we try to extend to students, and, the pandemic and the political issues we've had in the last year have really brought a lot to the surface in terms of students and how they're affected by what they see in social media and the news in general. And so, our message to them has been consistently that consider that you're seeing everything through a microscope. Had we had social media back in the 1960s when the civil rights era was happening, how would we feel about what happened in the 1960s versus what we know of it? Because all we had was general media back then, just the newspaper and maybe some television or radio coverage. And so you have to consider that we are seeing things at a heightened level, and that we also have to remind ourselves that if we see it on social media and it impacts us, there's a reason it impacts us, but does it have to navigate the rest of our day or how we feel about something in general? And so when you talk about, suicidality, one of the core components of people who are considering suicide is hopelessness. And so what we've seen in the last year is, the coverage of topics on the news, the general mainstream media, but also social media, it caused a lot of hopelessness in terms of our society, the health issue that we were all facing as a globe. And so, we're still piecing, getting through that with students and getting them support that they need and talking about that, because a lot of them were hopeless, and it didn't seem like we would get out of the pandemic or that our political future looked promising, and it still may not to some. And so, I would definitely advise people to try to find some positive. There is positive out there, and social media has it. We see positive news stories a lot, and what previous panelists had said before, engage with stuff that you want to see more often. And so if you want to see more positive news stories, or stories in general from your creators, engage with those positive stories, and hopefully we get to a place where that's the majority. And I feel like recently the majority has been negative on social media, but it doesn't have to stay that way. I think that if we kind of think about how we engage and what we give our attention to on social media, might shift things in a positive direction.
Yeah, I think so too, Casey. For me, there's a lot of things that I'm learning about that I definitely would not have known about if I didn't have that access. And those are important things, learning about injustices that are happening in the world, and how truly I can help, that I don't think I would have been able to have those resources, if I was born 20 years ago. But I also think that for me personally, when I'm seeing over and over again, negative, or that pisses me off. That makes me mad. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not fun anymore. And I think something that, and this is something else that I think we could talk about for hours, is the addiction part of it. I'm on my phone a lot, and like, I don't want to go being like, oh, I'm addicted to my phone, but I think a lot of us are addicted to our phones, and I think that it is so normalized to be addicted to your phone that it is hard to talk about, and it doesn't seem like you're addicted because of what I mean, how normal it is. But I mean, just something so simple as something so easy that I've been trying not to do is not trying to check my phone for the first thing I do in the morning. And it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, why is that harder than it needs to be? And it's, again, I think we can have a lot of conversations about that, but I think an important part of making social media safe is maybe not eliminating, but talking about that aspect of it.
Yeah, and I just want to pipe in and say something about that. Actually, if you connect, each time you want to pick up your phone and look at it, with making a social connection, don't pick up the phone, go find a person to talk to.
Yeah, finding balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you find yourself as an individual thinking, gosh, I think my phone usage is taking away from other areas of my life, that's your sign to kind of reassess how often you're using it, and making adjustments, like not looking at it first thing in the morning, or thinking about how many times a day you are checking your social media platforms, or how long you're on they always say TikTok, it takes up all your time, and it's true. And so catching yourself like, yep, been on here way too long, I need to get back to other things. It's okay to self-regulate. And so, if you find yourself going down that rabbit hole, so to speak, that you can catch yourself and change that behavior.
Yeah, behavior modification.
Yep.
Paul, do you have something to add to that?
Me? Yeah. I like what Danny said. We're addicted. Come on.
I mean, we got to start talking about it openly. We have to.
In the old days, it was, well, I got to check my email. I mean, why does not person respond in 3 microseconds to my email? And now it's gotten much bigger, right? It's not just email, it's all the other social media platforms. So the addiction hits home for me. I think, maybe we need like a double A, we sort of need something for all of us on, and think about the addiction problem, because it's definitely there.
Yep.
So I want to share something a little bit embarrassing, if that's so. Right, I'm pretty disciplined because I come from an older generation, right? So I'm 66 years old, so I'm an older generation. So I'm very disciplined with Facebook. However, recently IEEE, right, that's our major society, they published like 5 sort of top women in STEM, right? 5 top women in STEM, and they had a media blitz, I believe, on October 13th, and I was one of them. And so every week they had all of October, every week they had a woman that they were 5 weeks. So every week they had a woman they were displaying, and mine was October 13th. So what did I do? I mean, I never thought I will do that. I'm looking at the other women and seeing how many likes are they getting? How many likes am I getting? And so I'm telling Latifa that, oh, I've gotten more likes than her. And I was very surprised. And after that, I couldn't believe that I was doing that. And I was sort of acting like a teenager, right? So I think this is what is sort of happening. Imagine, okay, then I just shrugged it off. It didn't really bother, but I got more likes though than some other women. I haven't checked anything recently. So, but imagine if I'm instead of 6 a 16-year-old girl, and then my colleagues are getting, my friends are getting more likes than myself, I would get very upset, right? Because let's say we are sort of modeling our prom dresses or whatever, and they get more likes and I don't get as many likes. I mean, that could be very damaging. So I don't know. If I can be affected, then what about a 16-year-old girl?
It's a release of dopamine. It's a release of dopamine, and it's too bad we don't have Jeremy Ike from the, can't remember his organization right now. I want to say the Center for Students in Recovery. He's a recovery manager. He's an excellent resource. He talks about addiction, and addiction bleeds across a lot of different borders. So maybe that's a topic for another discussion.
So I think there are some, Danny, there's some, oh gosh, we had a big, Matthew has, right, he has a big, you want to read that, Danny? Or
yeah, I can just kind of try and sum up what Matthew was trying to say. And Matthew, if you want to unmute and jump in, you sure can. But I think, he's asking, he says it's next to impossible for people to avoid being affected by algorithms if you're on social media. I totally agree with that, right? It's how social media works. And the companies are incentivized to do that. What is the fix? Do we really know? And at the end, he says, learning to turn off is the most immediate solution, living slow. And I really like that. And I think, that's something that's been even more important to me, is just like, okay, what time do I need to turn my phone off? And it's not, and I think, as a teenager, back when I was in high school, it's very like, oh, my mom makes me turn my phone off at 10 p.m. That's so annoying. Like, that's so controlling. And so it's like, we have to, which is fair because you're socialized on your phone, right? So I think we have to, as in Danny's the fixer of all problems, but, as a society, as people researching social media, as social media governing is happening, as these social media companies are doing things, we have to figure out a way for teenagers, but anyone, to not want to be on their phone all the time. But that's almost the opposite of what Facebook is doing. I watched this documentary. Oh gosh, it was on Netflix. I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to find it. But they were saying, like, notifications come up, and they design notifications to try and get you to get on your phone more and to use your app more and get sucked in. And it's just so, it's so interesting. And it's so, I think there's so many problems ingrained in it that have flourished so quickly that have not been, we can't stop it because of how quickly it just kind of exploded.
See, Danny, I think I won't be so pessimistic, I think, to Matthew's comment about just forget about the algorithms, because I think in time, as I said, with the government and the AI folks, the researchers like us and the Facebook companies, if we can work together and test out these algorithms, there is a solution. But whether they are going to do it, but maybe eventually they might be forced to do it. So I won't be as pessimistic, but I'm not as optimistic either. So we have to wait and see how it's going to evolve. But I think some changes are going to happen.
I agree.
Yeah.
In the world of health and wellness, we always challenge students to focus on what they can control. And so we might not be able to control what happens with the algorithm and regulation or change, but can we control how we engage and how we use it? So, maybe we put our effort towards that side of things, but the other side is important. I mean, we have to put energy towards that too, but in any given moment, focus on what you can control. I can control not engaging with a post or unfollowing or whatnot.
Right.
I think Paul had some comment,
yeah,
right?
just a quick one. If you haven't seen, many of you may have seen this. If you haven't seen Black Mirror, I highly recommend to watch that because you can kind of laugh at and maybe be a little bit frightened by what you see there. The other one is Love, Death, and Robots, which so these are Netflix, I think. Yeah, Love, Death, and Robots and Black Mirror. They critique in an entertaining way what we're talking about.
Right. So do we want to wrap it up, Danny? I'll leave it to you.
Yep, I am just going to wrap it up. It is about time. Again, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, audience members, for joining us today. Really appreciate you all and everyone.